Welcome to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner, a show about shifting our individual and collective beliefs on what is possible for the future of humanity. As our understanding of how our reality continues to shift, we are at a point of reunification between science and spirituality. What does the world look like when we break free from the generational trauma that has kept most humans playing small for thousands of years and step into our full power as the co-creators of this reality? I always ask that you keep an open mind with this podcast. Ask yourself what resonates with my truth at this time and what does not. Respect your intuition, but see if you can get through the whole show because there might be that little nugget buried deep in the conversation that unlocks something for you. Welcome back to Changing the Channel. I am joined today by Marla Cartin. She's a writer, speaker, intuition development instructor at a university and co-founder of Intuitive Wellness Institute. So welcome to the show, Marla.
Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. So let's just really dive in. You're working at the Intuitive, or you co-founded the Intuitive Wellness Institute. So what's got you the most excited thing that you're working on over there?
Besides the mustache, right? Your mustache.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, we focus mainly on teaching intuition development as a part of your overall health and wellness, right? So the more that you develop your intuition, the easier your life gets, the healthier you become, and the less your aches and pains go away. And so I developed a program, a series of classes on how to do exactly that, starting from the very basics to more advanced, where we get into physics and the science of subtle energy and all of that.
Beautiful. Who's your main clients? Who are the, do you have like a clientele
A demographic?
base? Yeah, exactly.
Now, so this is something actually, I'm glad you asked. This is something that I found that it's such a different niche because I find that kids that are young, 20s, 18 to 20, they are so much more open than I think the generation that I grew up in was allowed to be. Whether we were is a different thing. We were Generation X. We were going to be what we were going to be. That was it. Not you, Joe, me.
Right.
So
I'm technically a millennial.
Right.
I'm in the last year or the first year of millennial.
Oh, 1980?
87. Yeah.
87? I thought 80, but anyway.
I don't know. Who knows?
The point is, yes. So I find that you have that, right? That age group. Then from there, you have the people who are around my age, 40s, who are like, is this all there is? Right? Because you think for a long time, and I don't know, I'm just saying from my experience, you work so hard at a job and you just become complacent almost. Mm-hmm. Right? So, and is this all there is? Am I willing to spend the next 25, however many years till I retire doing this, going through these motions? I'm not happy in this job. I don't know if I picked the right partner, la, la, la. So then there's that, right? And then my biggest client are actually between 60 and 75, 80, right?
Really?
Because it's insane because, and I love it because they're so open, and you would think that it would be the opposite, right? But there are so many people that are finding that I see almost daily in private clients that are really intuitive, that are really to the point of psychic, that people who have gone from, not doing anything in retirement to all of a sudden they're master Reiki healers. I mean, it's so amazing to watch this shift of something that they didn't even consider before. So I don't have a demographic. I have like every 20 years, I find there's like 20-year gaps, and then those are my clients.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And that kind of goes along. There's the idea of turnings. I forget the author who coined it, but basically every 20 years, you go through these experiences, and every 80 years there's a major turning. So it's a complete shift in the society that you're experiencing, and it tends to line up every 20 years. There's a new set of like a generation that comes through and they have these abilities. And it's, we were talking about it earlier. We were talking about, you know, kind of fish being in water, right? Like you can only experience your unique perspective of reality. We're all viewing reality from a different perspective, and you can only view reality from your unique perspective. And when you're intuitive, you might be able to understand what people are thinking, but you can't see through their eyes and experience through their brain, through all the limitations, the limiting beliefs, the lenses that they have built up. You're not experiencing reality through that perspective. So you might be completely a psychic, intuitive, a natural healer, but because there's no framework or belief in your mind to understand what that is, you're just experiencing reality from, this is how everybody's experiencing reality. And then you come across somebody who has a framework that explains what you've been experiencing for the last 60 or 70 years. And they're telling you, hey, not everybody experiences this. Now the lights come on. They're like, oh, this is what I've been experiencing in life. So it's almost as if the society kind of shuts down the idea of these psychic abilities, the, you know, tapping into quantum realities. And now we're in the pendulum swing where society is becoming a little bit more open to these ideas, and not just open to them in we're going to allow them, but open to them in finding out and understanding exactly what is happening, which I think you're kind of a part of, like the actual science of quantum reality.
Well, thank you. I do think that you're right too, is I do think there's a period of time when we just, as a society, just accepted what was told to us. And I think that, you know, and whether or not it was a pandemic or whatever it was, but there was something that was happening before that. You could feel a shift, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it just kind of, people just were done with it, right? Like they're just like, why are we accepting? It's like, think about it. If there's a color spectrum on the color spectrum, our eyes and our technology can only see 0.003% of the color spectrum.
Right.
Well, so what I always tell people in my class is that, okay, I want you to think of it this way. If you have a basket of red grapes and one bunch of green on top, and you go to somebody like, oh, do I have too many red grapes, but they're colorblind? They can see green for some reason, but they can't see red. It doesn't mean that those red ones are not there. It just means they can't see them, mm-hmm. right? So they don't have an explanation for that. It's just like viruses before the microscope was invented. There was somebody that eventually said, hey, what if there's something invisible in this water that's killing us? Or, you know, and then that person's like, oh my God, they're crazy. She's a witch, burn her at the stake. And It turns out a microscope was invented and there's something in the water that was killing us. So that's how I try to explain it to people, is that just approach this journey with an open mind. And we find that 99.9% of them, actually all of them so far, leave with an understanding of how it works. So the other thing that you had said was that you can't see in people's, how they view life. Well, this is what I always tell people their intuition is for, is you're gathering in, energetic information at a different frequency, and your intuition is going to bring that in, but it is your job to interpret that mm-hmm. in a way that passes a message along, either to yourself or someone else. You have to go to your frame of reference because the information that you're getting is only from your lens.
Right.
So that translation is really important. And I don't think there's people that understand how to do that or what that means.
Yeah, I think that's that's kind of the idea behind being a clean vessel, right? To get rid of all your lenses and traumas if you're going to go into the spiritual realm, because you have the ability, you could take the information from that person, but if you soil it with your, negative worldviews or your perspective or your belief system, then it becomes less functional and a less positive message for that person. It's a less clean, pure message for that person, because like you said, until they can build that technique of using their own intuition, where, they're going to have, if you can tap into your own intuition, there is no intermediary between you and the information that is coming. Whereas when you have to go
Right.
to a psychic or a
Right.
channel or something like that, that person is the intermediary, which it's just like playing the game of phone. Every single time you add another person between the start and the end, you're going to have miscommunication, you're going to have loss of signal, you're going to have all these different interruptions between that information that needs to get from point A to point B. And that's what it is in the psychic, in the medium world as well. Like the more you can tap into your own intuition, the less you have to filter through other people's perspectives to get that information.
That brings up another point that I have. Something, I mean, I kind of bristles me, I guess, is I don't like the gatekeeping in this
Yeah.
industry. I don't feel like, I don't want people to have to come to me to get intuitive information. I really do think that if you just learn a little bit about science and the way that it works in how you get intuitive information and how that gets translated, like you just said, then you don't have to. It's like there's so much gatekeeping that goes on, I think, that makes them feel, I don't know, it bothers me, I guess, because I think it's for everybody, right?
Right.
Isn't
And I
that why
think
we're here?
I
So
think
everybody's vibration raises?
Yeah, exactly. I think there's two kind of perspectives you can take from that, because there's also a large part of the population that doesn't want to believe at this point, that doesn't want to believe in something outside of
That's accurate.
themselves. So as long as, if you have this ability, as long as you're willing to share it with anybody who wants to learn it, then yeah, you're not gatekeeping. But just because everybody doesn't want to learn it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's being gate kept by those. Because
I agree.
you
Yeah,
know,
that's a good point.
I've talked to tons of people, and it's like, okay, here's the quantum science. Here's my personal experience. I'm literally able to tap into another dimension and bring in information that didn't exist before. But you don't want to believe that, and you're just gonna you'll assign whatever belief that you want to what I'm doing. So there's really no point in me trying to argue or
Teach you, right?
teach you about it. It's just like, okay, I'll give you the information and you can take with it what you want. You can use it if you choose to, and if you don't choose to, if you're like, I don't believe in psychic abilities, I don't believe in anything outside of the five sense reality. Well, you're gonna live in that reality, and there's coming a time where that reality, that purely five sense reality, the reductionist perspective of reality, isn't going to be tenable with the rest of society. It's going to be in the antithesis of where we are moving as a humanity, and that is going to be, it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult to come out of that, especially if you continue to dig your heels in the face of evidence that continues to come out. That transition from being the last person to make this jump versus the first person, even though these I look back 50 or 60 or 70 years ago at these psychics that were coming out, and they were being blasphemized. They were basically being torn apart, like you're just a crazy person. They were putting them on medications. That was probably a pretty hard walk to walk as well, just as difficult as it'll be for the last five sense reality person to make the jump to the quantum.
Yes, I agree. That brings up a really good point too. So two things. A, I agree with you that there is not everybody is a gatekeeper, because you're right. Not everybody. I think everyone should open their intuition for their own health and wellness, just as a way to read energy in your own body, for mental illness, for preventative medicine, for trying to heal your own self before you go to, I believe in Western medicine. I'm not saying I don't, but before we go down, as you were saying earlier, managing symptoms, right? It's more of a way to figure out the root of the issues. And a lot of those are emotional things too. So yes, there are people who aren't going to be doing this for a living, and then you're going to go to them for a reading. All I'm saying, but I don't like the gatekeeping of like the mystery behind it, and I do this and you can't. That's what I don't like.
I agree.
But the other part that you just said is, 50, 60 years ago or whatever, that even before that, almost 100. Yeah.
Probably about 100 years.
yeah, this is what I tell people all the time too, is that as a woman, right, I vote. Women have died for my right to vote. Okay. I'm psychic. I was born that way. I was born being able to see things other people couldn't see. Women have been burned at the stake for my abilities to come out here today to say this. So I always say, like, why? So to, to I think about that often. What you just said is like, that's a really hard road to go, you know,
Mhm.
to back then. And I think that it's also our job, you, me, not just as a woman, like there's the Edward Caseys of the world and the, you know,
Right. Esther
all of the
Hicks
really,
and
exactly. Right. So Bashar,
Bashar, exactly. I mean, he was doing that
I mean,
in the 80s. He was having channeled
exactly.
readings for, I think in the 80s, it was a very specific group of people, and you had to, you kind of had to
Yeah.
know what you were getting into. He wasn't putting it out on TikTok in the 80s. But now it's almost ubiquitous. Like people see a channel and they're like, oh, wow, look at that. Look at this information that's coming through. And it's hard to argue the immense amount of information he's able to bring through
And he doesn't falter ever. There's never
ever.
a, like, it's always the same. It's always consistent. He never falters. There's, you know how, so channeling, this is one of the things. So you had mentioned that you channel information. And when I give private readings, I 90% of the time I have no idea what I've said to somebody because it just, all I know is that my throat, yeah, feels really dry. And then, but I've heard recordings of myself doing it and it's unnerving. And I'm sure you have the same. But I think there's something to the fact that my voice, like I'm not a very clear speaker as like right now, as you find out as we keep listening or talking. There's so many things and so many competing thoughts that things don't come out very smooth. When it's a channel, it's very quick. There are no pauses. There are no ums. There are no, it's just like a bet, 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 and the things get repeated. Right. And so that is what I think of all the time when I first started watching people like Esther Hicks, Abraham Hicks,
Yeah.
right, and Bashar. But yes, um, they don't
Esther
have
was the
any,
was the was the
the woman.
being. Yeah.
Yes, and then Abraham is
Abraham was the channel,
right. I don't.
I believe.
I want. Anyway,
It
yes, you're
doesn't
right.
matter. I want to take a minute from the show to share how you can support changing the channel. This show is my passion project, and if you feel called to support, the best place to start is by subscribing and sharing the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Next would be to check out my website in the show notes, where you can become a VIP of the show and get exclusive content not available anywhere else. Finally, you can engage with the Q&A and polls to have direct say in the direction of the show. I am forever thankful for your support. And now, back to the show.
But I do notice that there's no ums and there's no pauses and and the cadence is always the same and the information is always the same and it's very consistent. And I'd love to have a conversation with Daryl. I can't remember the person
Yeah.
about how he feels afterwards. Like,
Yeah,
are you
because
exhausted when you're done?
I so I can definitely feel it in my throat, and I can
Mm-hmm.
if you actually you can probably go back and listen to some of the podcasts that I've put out already, and you will notice a difference between the first 5 minutes and then the last 20 or 30 minutes, because the first 5 minutes, like, I'm in my own head. I'm not worrying about what the conversation is. I'm more worried about, okay, how do I introduce this person? How do I get the conversation going? And then once it gets into that flow, there's no ums, there's no pauses, there's no kind of waiting to think of something to say. It's a clear cadence, and it just continues to come out. So the other one I will say is that I think it's fascinating to watch interviews with Daryl when he's not channeling, because he has retained an incredible amount of information that has been channeled through him. And I'm sure doing it for 35 years, that information does get retained. And maybe it only is from him watching the videos, because I experienced that as well. When I'm channeling, I'll have a stream of thought and then it's gone. Like, I have no idea what I just talked about for the last 20 or 30 minutes. So
Do you ever
it's
do
interesting to see.
automatic writing and then see what, because then you have a record of it later? Because I did it recently and I was flummoxed. I was looking I was looking at it and I'm like, what? I mean, the things that I was, that I had written down were just, I
It's
personally would not have thought of.
Yeah, I do that all the time. I've got these journals that I've been keeping for the last 2 years, and I'll go back. I'll just pick it to. I'll open it up, and it's February 3rd, 2021, and I'm literally writing about what I'm actually working on at this very moment. It is crazy to see how accurate it is, and what I was
Right.
talking about back then, based on the information that I knew, it's weird. It's odd. It's like it's hard to explain.
I I had the same situation. I've never been like I'm a writer, but a journaler, I don't know. Um, I was as a kid, and I think I had a traumatic experience regarding journaling, and so
Mm.
I stopped.
Somebody found your journal.
Yeah, and then they use it against you. But as
Yeah.
a writer, there's a difference, right? And as somebody who isn't always like, there was nothing bad in it. It was just, you know,
Right.
I'm a
You're
writer. Like but so I didn't. So now, I only do it for I keep track of all client communication, but I have to physically write it down, otherwise I won't remember because I don't know what I'm saying. So I just recently was going back through a couple years ago and the same thing, and I was like, oh my God. If there's one piece of advice that I could give to anybody, it's basically, what if you start to get into a routine, right? It's 5 minutes a day of trying to just silence, right? Just start writing. You can just
right.
write the color blue over and over again if you want to, and then eventually something's going to come out. Just keep track of it, because you will be astounded when you go back and look at A, how far you come, and B, how much you were intuitively picking up on. It's crazy.
Yeah. It still boggles my mind, and I wish I did it more. I wish I and it seems to get me out of, when you're experiencing like a negative feeling or a negative,
Oh,
a day.
absolutely.
If you
Yeah.
go back and read those journals, it's just like, oh wait, I've known this stuff for so long. Like, what am I worried about? Like, I am clearly on my path, because 2 years ago I was writing out what my path would look like, and here I am walking the path that I envisioned 2 years ago. So let's
Wait,
envision a
can I
path.
ask you, 2 years ago, were you living where you are now? Was this when you were before
This
you
was
like,
before. It was after my awakening. It was after my, Kundalini spiritual awakening to the
walk
ability.
me through that? Do you mind? Like what
Yeah, I can.
that did?
It was basically like a weekend in August 2021, and I went to bed. I was like the same person. I was an agnostic. I didn't believe in anything above myself.
Mhm.
I was a very materialistic person. Not like trying to get all the material in the world, but like materialistic as in there was nothing outside of the five sense reality. It was a very reductionistic perspective on
Oh,
the world.
it was just external validation. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Um, it's external validation is
It was
what I
society.
always say. Yeah.
Right.
I was the
Society
same way. You're not,
built
this
me
is,
to do
yeah,
that.
I'm trying to get out of the sun over here. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Yes.
So then the next morning I woke up and I was connected. I started writing, I started journaling, I started, basically talking to myself. I was basically channeling for myself for the next couple of days. And in that space, I awoken to this higher sense of reality, this multidimensional aspect of reality that I had never been awoken to before. And again, I hadn't been practicing. There wasn't a system that brought this on. It just happened. It one day I woke up and I was connected to the universe. And the years before that, I was at least unconscious of my connection to the universe. Again, it's I didn't know I was swimming in water at that point. And then one day I knew I was swimming in water. And that was like it changed everything for me. And it wasn't a quick change. It took me, I had 3 day period. Then I forgot about it for like 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
Then I had a mushroom journey. and experienced the totality of the consciousness of the universe. I went to, the dark orb in the middle of the universe, basically void of any duality whatsoever. Came back from that, had to process that for about a month and figure out, okay, what the heck, what does this mean? Like, I don't even understand what this is. So started doing some research, figuring that out. Then got involved with some groups, some spiritual groups that kind of gave me a little bit more understanding. And then eventually led to a past life regression, which really gave me some perspective on why I'm here, what I'm here to do. And then it's been just figuring out what my life looks like after this understanding of where we're at in humanity, this transition away from the reductionistic separation consciousness that you and I are all separate from each other, moving towards a more unified consciousness where we understand, okay, like there is an energy field that is connecting all of us, and the more that we play into and feel into that energy field, the better society is going to go, because we've seen what happens when we go down a purely reductionistic, a purely Newtonian physics-based map of the world. It leads us to war and crime and destroying the planet, because we're all fighting over what we consider as finite resources instead of cooperating to maximize the usage of those finite resources as a feeling of more unified consciousness.
I couldn't agree more. Let me ask you a question. So you went to bed one day and you woke up and you started writing and all of these things. Do you think that there was something going to happen that this, and I know it was gradual after that, but it was kind of a sudden,
It was a kick out the door,
Right. Do you think that in some way, shape, or form, it saved your life? That's why it had to happen to you like that? Because something was going to happen, or you're going down a path, you're making a bad choice, something in some way, it saved your life? Because that's what I'm getting from this.
I would say definitely. So how I kind of have put it over the years is, when you're not on your path, when you're in the physical reality, but you're not doing the things that you were meant to do, your intuition begins to whisper to you. It sends you very subtle signs, and hopeful that, okay, you'll pick up on these subtle signs. As you ignore those subtle signs, it starts to, maybe it'll start knocking on the door. It'll start sending things into your life like illness, disease, poverty, all the negative aspects of reality, until you finally, at some point, it just kicks the door down and says, all right, it's time to walk this path. Let's go. We're going this way. Figure it out as you go. But here's just a glimpse of what you're expected to do or be, or why you're here. And that was what happened to me. And I think what a lot of people go through is, and what I would say Newtonian science has done a very good job at, is figuring out how to help people cope with this house being on fire, them walking the wrong pathway and not going down the pathway that was designed for them. They've done a very good job of helping people cope with that ability to ignore the signs, ignore their intuition, ignore their path in life. And that allows people to walk that path, that wrong path, or at least stand still on the wrong path and not progress towards something that they're supposed to be progressing towards, the lessons that they're here to learn, the experiences that they're here to have. It allows them to stay there for longer and longer and longer, until at some point something breaks. Somebody talks to them and says, hey, have you heard about intuition? Or have you heard about God? Have you heard about the universe? And that sparks something in them to be like, okay, there's something else out there. There's something more to this than just what I've been experiencing.
Well, who would profit from it if we
exactly. Nobody
would. Who would profit if suddenly everybody realized that they were in charge, right?
Exactly.
And not even just healed, just understood that, and that's something that actually has been really it's hard to even get into the subject without worrying that you're going to be seen as a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
But there are so many things that I think over the course of just doing the scientific research that I've done in order to create the classes that I have is that a lot of the times, if you even just look at the things that we do accept as a society, well, some of us, um, that are scientifically proven, right? Like your meridian system or your chakra system, there's no doubt, right? Regardless of the word, if you're going to use chakra, you're going to use
Right.
energy
Energy
vortexes along
center
your
or
spine,
something.
right?
Right.
Whatever. The word is irrelevant. The point is that if you really look at things, like for example, I'm going to give you a good one: thyroid problems, right? So if I were to go and get a blood test done and they're going to test me for thyroid problems, I think what they do is they test for T4 cells, right? And if that's off, and what they're not testing for is the conversion rate of T3 cells to T4 cells.
Hmm.
And forgive me if I'm wrong, any doctors, but it's one of those. I could have it backwards. But the point is, I just know that they're not testing for the conversion rate. Now, if they had tested for the conversion rate, right? So if that rate has slowed down, that a lot of the times it's just a very simple addition to minerals, calcium, magnesium, something to that effect that might bring the conversion rate up and give you that pause to say, okay, what am I, let's figure out what's going on here before you just jump to, oh my God, I have Graves' disease, or I have, a thyroid
Right.
hyperthyroid is hypo, one of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, because so why aren't we testing for those things, right? But I also know that from what I just know about being able to read energy, I can see those things in people's energy. And there's all these studies that have been done where energy healers, medical intuitives, they had this one study. It's actually in the book called The Subtle Anatomy by Cindy Dale. Subtle energy. Here it is. This one. It was in here. See it?
The subtle body.
Yeah. So I was just like, it's like a medical textbook. Anyway, there's this whole study in there about how they found that medical intuitives, right? They did this study, and that the medical intuitives had a 98% rate of getting things correct, diagnosis correct. Western medicine, same people, 78%. Well, what is that? Why?
Right.
Right. And so if that makes no sense, because you would think, right? So anybody that is saying that they're, your ability to check into energy or things like that, it's just, that's why I'm saying who would profit? Who would profit if we knew that if we were in touch with our intuition and how energy works within our bodies, and we could prevent big diseases from happening just by reading subtle signs, who would profit?
Right. And that's where we're at in society, is trying to figure out, okay, how do we get off this growth at all cost system? Because that's my background is finance, so I understand where we're at in society. So they've created a system, a monetary system, the US dollar system, which is based off of growth. It only works if the system continues to grow. So any solution that takes away from that growth, that removes GDP from our economy, it is seen as a negative, because we've built this system, and it's based on fractional reserve banking. It's based on the ability of a bank to take in deposits and then loan 90% of those deposits out. And that system only works if you continue to grow faster than the economy. Like, you have to grow, that money only grows if the economy is growing. When it shrinks, that money system shrinks, and it's bad for everybody. And we've all agreed, I mean, you and I haven't agreed. At some point, our parents and grandparents agreed to be a part of this system. And now we're at this weird phase where we're trying to figure out, okay, we know that growth at all costs is not a sustainable thing. It's not, it doesn't work. It's impossible. But the opposite of that is to send everybody else back into 50 years worth of growth, we send it backwards, and we end up with, we actually, if we mark to market the actual GDP versus this inflated GDP that we're all considering, we would go back to, we would lose probably close to 70% of the economy. And that's a huge number. However, it would be far better for society to kind of to take that hit and move forward without, because there really is no other way. I don't see any other way to get off of this treadmill that we're on currently, and that's kind of the tricky part. And that's what, again, I give a lot of respect to the people at the Fed who are trying to figure this out, because they didn't start the problem either. I mean, Ben Bernanke wasn't the one that took us off the gold standard and brought us into this federalist banking system that has brought about the system that we're currently on. But he's doing his best to figure out how do we get off of that. And I think a lot of people get really caught up in blaming the people who are trying to figure out these gigantic, massive societal problems. They blame them, and they're like, all right, throw them out, let's get a new person and they'll figure it out. And it's like, no, we need to figure this out as a society. Like, we all have to take a hit on this if we're going to move forward. At least that's from my perspective. And again, I'm not a world-class economist, but I do have a basic understanding of what the system has been doing for the last 50 to 70 years. And again, it started with fractional reserve banking. Then we went off the gold standard, which basically became a fiat currency. And then through the fiat currency, the only way to keep that system, that boat alive, to keep bailing all that water out is perpetual growth. And anything that hurts that perpetual growth system now becomes a threat to the society as a whole. So again, getting this information out and letting people make decisions for themselves is probably the best way to do this, because I think the solution is in everyone understanding what the problems are and then us coming up with a solution.
Right. So this is why I'm so adamant on the education portion of what we're talking about, right? So I always feel like if we can start at a very fundamental, basic level, and we go over science that's already available to us, but we make it accessible and we begin to educate, right? So I teach at a college level right now. So those college students, right, they already have less of a need for an external validation, materialistic things than I ever saw growing up, right? And even like you had said, like I went through a period of time in my own life where I always looked for an external validation. I mean, I worked in fashion, for Christ's sake. And you know what I mean? And it was, and I just felt like it just, I don't know, but you can see it in kids. They're just like, well, I don't really need anything. Like they don't just go out and shop for fun. Like it becomes more of a meaningful existence. So I feel like you're saying, yes, it's going to have to be a complete, reversal essentially to how we're living. But I feel like we can make it happen if people like you and I, if we are doing it in a very approachable way that is non-threatening to people's livelihood and things of that nature at this moment, then right. Those little things, those changes. So the people that are in college that are being educated right now on this, they're going to go and have children. They're going to raise their children differently.
Right.
And that is how we begin generational change. And eventually they're going to be able to teach at a starting off in elementary school about mindfulness and, what external validation is and how to pay attention to your intuition and discern those things. Anyway, I'm not saying it's a perfect solution. It's how I'm trying to contribute.
And I think that comes with really rethinking the structure of the school system, because the school system,
I agree.
The public school system, at least, is from the 1930s and 40s, and it hasn't really changed since. It was designed to create good factory workers, because that's what we needed in America, were people to go into the factories and create things. And now it's creating good consumers, and those good consumers are again, they're trying to solve problems with the same type of thinking that created the problems. That Einstein talks about that. And we need solutions that are, you know, a step above the where we were when we created those problems. And you know, I think there are some solutions that exist in the quantum finance world, in the idea of a you know, a decentralized economic system that does seem to play a little bit better. Again, I'm not very well versed in that, but from what I've read and what I understand, it does seem to be a better system than the fractional reserve banking system, growth at all cost fiat system. But again, there's always trade-offs. There's always going to be a positive and a negative to anything that you do. So we just have to be, again, you know, like you said, it starts with the education. It starts with allowing everybody to be making these decisions instead of a very small percentage of people to make those decisions.
Well, you know, case in point, you were just saying the school system, right? So I found that, and I don't know how you dealt with school. I found that for me, I was kicked out of every class because I couldn't sit still, right? And I literally would fall out of my chair. I actually have a good one for you. So there's one day I'm in math. Okay. So here's like this. I had a notebook that was open like this, and I had a pencil like this, and I was wiggling around so much that I hit my chin like that.
Oh.
This went flying into the back of the room, and I fell on the floor. And I'll never forget this. My teacher walked by, and she just looks at me on the floor with like papers everywhere, and she goes, "Okay," and then stood there silently waiting for me to like embarrassingly like get up, and nobody made a move. It was like the most embarrassing thing that ever happened.
Right.
Now, the reason why I'm telling you this story is because I'm smart. Like, I started school early. You know, I literally would talk to you about quantum physics. I'm a college professor, you know, but
Right.
in school, if I didn't sit still and memorize things the way that everybody else did, I wanted to understand why I needed to do it this way. Or or I'd ask a question and they would just be like, "Can't you just read this and write down what I just told you?" Right.
Right.
And that is what bothered me. Right. So then that brings you into this whole neurodivergent brain situation. Right. So you're taught neurodivergent is wrong, like different is wrong. When in actuality, when it comes to accessing certain areas of our brains,
It's powerful.
thank you. Do I wish I could sit still sometimes? Yes, absolutely. It would make my life a whole lot easier, but it doesn't mean like that, you know, just because anyone can memorize things. Okay. Don't tell me you can't memorize. You can memorize it.
You don't even need to anymore. AI has it all figured out. Anything you need to memorize, like AI's got it.
Right. So it's like people would say to me, "Well, how come, you know, if you're kicked out of French class every day and I never even took the book home
Right.
In high school, I still got straight A's. How did I do that?" Sadly, I intuitively just would be like, "Da, da, 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 da." But I wanted to learn. I didn't want to memorize.
Right. That was my experience in college. Like, I didn't buy textbooks for 3.5 years.
Holy mo!
I
Wow.
bought textbooks for the first semester and realized that it was a waste of time. So there were a couple classes. There was an English class that I had to buy the textbook because we were literally reading stories out of it. But everything else, all my finance classes, business classes, psych, all those classes, I didn't buy the textbook because I went to class and I studied and you know, it was very easy for me to learn from listening to people, and I did not learn from reading books. And I figured that out, and I, you know, got some very nice, some fun evenings out on my mom because she would give me, you know, $1,000 for those textbooks, and I would take them to the bar and enjoy myself.
Oh, look at you! You're always a businessman.
Yeah.
Well, that actually brings up another good point, is that, and this goes along with even like your intuitive gifts. So you just said you learn by listening.
Right.
Okay. You know that about yourself. Most people don't. I ask almost every client, like, do you know, how do you learn the best? Right. So one of the things that I'll ask is, so I just met you, right? So you just met me. Just say, how do you remember my name if I'm in a room of people? How do you personally remember my name?
I would have to create some type of mnemonic device, or how I would remember your name is that I went to high school with a girl named Carla Martin, And I would say it's the reverse. It's Marla Cartin.
Right. Okay.
That's the only way I would remember your name.
Okay, so that to me is exhibiting two different learning types. So you have, and that would tell me exactly how your intuition works in your body. So that would tell me the mnemonic device, because of the way that you're remembering it and the sound, is your hearing, right? And you already said I learned by hearing, which is clairaudient, right? You're going to pick up intuitive information in a clairaudient way, which doesn't always mean you're hearing it,
like physically hearing it.
Right. That is one part of it. There's a whole different thing. The other thing is you paired my name with something that you already knew. And that is somebody who can channel, because that is a download claircognizant thing, right? Not clairsentient, where I'm going to feel things physically in my body. It's claircognizant. You're actually pairing it with something you already knew. And that is how, like I said earlier, our intuition development is our dictionary on how to interpret intuitive information. Right. So you just knowing that how you learn is a big deal. I wish that everybody could understand that. I wish that in school we were even offered classes.
You could test on it.
You could, or you could have a choice. Yes, exactly. Or you could have a choice. Hey, this class is really good for visual learners.
Right.
You know, how, just so you know that, right? And that everybody knows their learning style, because then they know how to also understand how intuitive information comes to them the easiest. Not that you can't develop the other ways, but it's how you develop the easiest. Like for me, if I want to remember your name in a room full of people, I will literally see the letters in the air, almost like newspaper, old school courier type, bang, 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 like Joe. Right? I didn't know that was not how everybody did it. As you said earlier, that was my lens of the world, right? And also growing up, I could see beings. So that was my first gift that I realized I had, was being clairvoyant, seeing, right? And I'm also a visual learner. So I, and things change, but I'm always a visual learner. If I see something, I'll remember it. I'm like almost like a photographic memory. I'll like see it.
Yeah.
I just think that everybody should have that information.
We should all, and that's how we should kind of be designing this next iteration of schools, because it's going to be coming. And what I've kind of put together is, yes, there's probably 3 or 4 different main ways that most people learn. So you have to kind of separate kids out in how they learn. And then you kind of have to separate them out at the speed at which they learn as well. And that takes some rethinking of classrooms, instead of it being just, okay, you're in 5th grade and 6th grade and 7th grade. It's like, okay, you're in, the neurodivergent level 3 classroom. And when you're ready to graduate from that classroom, you go to the next classroom. And yeah, you might have kids that are 14 years old that are graduating, college at that point. But that's where we're at in humanity. Like, just because they're able to graduate college doesn't make it, bad or wrong. But, you have to think outside of the box for some of these issues and problems that we're experiencing. And you have to admit that there are issues and problems, because I think a lot of people, have a real hard time saying, hey, there is actually a problem with our school system.
I don't think, yes, I agree with you. But what I'm finding is that I'm going to go back to what you were saying earlier in your point, and agree with you on the, there seems to be a huge blame game. And what that to me is like, that's a very narcissistic personality trait, right? Mm-hmm. The blame game. Like, all of a sudden they start a fire over here, right? So but then they blame somebody else for that fire, to take the attention away from the fact that they started the fire, right? The person standing closest to he's standing closest to the fire couldn't have been me, right? It's just like this, who cares? There's a fire, put it out. Like, let's work together as a team. That's what I mean, is that it's just, whenever people, do you know what it is? I know what it is. It's the accountability issue that I think times are changing into all of us realizing that there's nothing wrong with taking accountability for your mistakes and trying to put in motion things to correct them instead of trying to blame other people and hoping you don't get caught, because
Right.
we're no longer burned at a stake, like, or beaten or hung, right? So what's going to happen to us if we just say, ooh, I fucked that up. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I messed that up. Sorry. I didn't mean to
No,
say the
you're
F
good.
word.
We swear on this all the time.
Okay. You know, like, what's going to happen other than you garner some respect and you
Right.
set an example and you're willing to change?
You lead by example. You don't lead by,
Thank you.
cowering in fear of what other people are going to think about you.
Or blaming other people for your crap. That, you know, that's what I can't, that's what I think it is. I see that all the time. And I also see it, you know, I have children that have gone through the school systems, or even just in general. I have a 22-year-old and I have a 15, almost 15-year-old. And both of them have the same hot button, that if you don't take account, they cannot stand when somebody just doesn't take accountability for their actions. And the revisionist history thing, like, well, it didn't happen like that. It happened like this, you know.
Right. Yeah.
That's what you were saying earlier. It's like they just blame. Well, that's great. You can blame everybody else, but how do we fix it?
Right. Let's work on solutions. Let's not try to, like, figure out who's to blame about this whole issue. It's like, okay, like, we see that there is a problem. Let's figure out how to solve that problem and work together to solve that problem. But again, how do you profit from that? How do you profit from solving problems? And that it's this circular, like, there is no start or end to where the problem is. There's just a whole bunch of different systems that were built on top of each other that have gotten us to this point. And now we have to figure out, how do we, because in 2012, there was everybody knew that there was a problem, right? We had to tear the system down. We had to take it all down, but there was no system to be put back into place to because we have this society that is built around some type of order. Maybe that order has gotten a little bit too powerful for its own good, and we've put too much trust in the order that has been built, and we're starting to really experience and see that. But we can't just tear the whole thing down and start over at the beginning of time. Like, we have to carefully and intricately dismantle an old system while simultaneously building a new system. And that the only way that this works is if we are all understand that we're connected and we're all working towards the same solution. Not the same solution. We're all working to solve the problem, because you're going to have multiple different solutions, and they're going to, the beauty of having 8 billion people on the earth is that you can A, B, C, D test all these theses, all these ideas within a year, and get, okay, here's a clear winner. We tested 4 different things, and C was the best way to do this. Let's roll this out in a very quick and fast manner. But we can't do that. We can't roll that all out through these old systems of control, because it just takes way too long. The bureaucracy has built up, and it's just impossible to get that stuff going. So again,
so how do you start?
You have to start with building these new solutions, and I think they're already in place. Again, in the financial system, we do have a quantum financial system. Again, not without its kinks and its things that have to get worked out before it's a fully functional system, but it's being built. I think with the schooling system, it almost has to come from a private sector perspective, because the public sector has made it very clear that it's going to take a long time to make these changes. So, and again, that's the difficult part, because there is a finite amount of resources in this system that we've built. So how do you allocate those resources to this school system while also making it accessible to as many people as possible? And maybe what it probably takes is some public-private partnerships. So it's publicly funded money that's going towards privately run institutions. That seems to be the best way. That's how we built NASA. That's how we got to the moon.
Right.
If you believe we went to the moon. And that's how this massive economic shift happened the last time, was these public private partnerships, where it was public money funding private sponsorships. That's how the university system was funded. It was public money funding these schools.
Yeah.
That eventually became public private odd entities that were for profit, that took private or
Right.
public money and kind of blurred the whole lines between all of that stuff. So, that's the solution. Or, you try to change the system from within, and you try to make that, which is another option that I think could work. And maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe it is starting these new systems, building them up, and also changing the system from within. I mean, I saw a beautiful ad from Apple yesterday or this morning, how they're claiming that they're going to be carbon neutral by the end of next year in every aspect of their facility, of their company.
That's all. Wow.
So like most people were talking about 2030. Now they're carbon neutral. They've switched to aluminum casing. There's no plastics in their offices. Like that, it's pretty incredible to see what a group of driven people can accomplish in a very short period of time when they have a clear task and a clear ability to do so. Because I mean, you look at like Tesla, what Tesla has done. Imagine if we did that instead of electric cars. We did that on our education system. We took the best and brightest of the country, the world, everybody in society right now, and we tasked them. Okay, let's rebuild our education system, and then we spent a year doing that.
You bring up a good point. So it's one of those things that I think about because I wish I had I can't remember the name of the project, but the government had gone into public schools and were like giving kids like ESP tests because they were developing their program. I think it was like Project X or Project something, right? And so I think about
them and the Russians were doing the same thing. They were taking all
right.
the ESP kids and like basically.
Well, it's because they created the remote view program and the whole
right.
they were using, but they've been using ESP to communicate. The Navy was anyway in the 50s. So this is after that. So they were doing something else, which I think you're right. I think it was a remote view. Anyway, it made me think about that when you were just talking and how you were saying, like, what if we did like how Tesla did and took the best and the brightest? And how do you find these people, right? How do you find, so like you were saying earlier about having a group like the coach, like the, spiritual community, right? And not just because I find that I lead groups here that are people that want to be involved in the spiritual community. But then when you're a leader in that community, where do you go then? Right. So let's say that I did have something to offer, you have something to offer. We can work together easily. We could work together. And so how do we begin that is what I'm saying. Like we could probably make a difference, honestly, in something.
I mean, that's what it's going to take is everybody kind of stepping into this. And there are systems that you can use. You can, it's actually very easy to start a LLC right now,
right.
using AI, you're able to basically start a business and figure out how do I market myself? How do I get people, how do I get information out there? And that's what I think AI is starting to do. It's fully democratizing the ability to have exponential growth. It no longer requires the investment of angel investors and hiring a team of lawyers, marketers, salespeople, and all that stuff. Like, you're able to, on a pretty shoestring budget, get these ideas together. So, maybe we can come up with, I don't know, $800,000 with 500 investors putting in that money in, and we can start this revolutionary idea and get that up off the ground, get it running, and again, beta test it within the first 2 years, and then what that takes is open sourcing. So you have to instead of saying, let's say we put this business together and now it's like, okay, well, now we're going to go take this to the rest of the world. And it takes us 40 years to bring this out. And instead of, again, the for-profit model you would franchise it. So, you got to pay $150,000 to buy into the system. What if we just open sourced it because it's good for humanity? It's good for everybody. We're making enough money for us to live. Here's our system. Go put it out into your community, however you want to do it. And again, if you have questions, we can be a guide for you because we've already done this. We can help you. But for the most part, figure this out on your own. Here's the basic idea behind it. And then boom, now it's distributed again through the internet. You could in 1 week have it in every single community that was open to trying new things out. And then now you have this system that was tested, it was proven. Maybe it is only 10 of the smartest people in the world that create these systems, but they have to give it out. It has to be open source. It has to be, okay, here's what we figured out. Now you guys run with it. And that is the spark that would, I think, help people make this massive change on the planet.
I'm quiet because I'm thinking. I'm like,
Yeah.
It's
an interesting idea.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, on this phone call alone, we've come up with quite a few ideas that have actually are pretty helpful. I mean, that could be
luckily,
done. That literally could be done.
yeah, luckily AI is going to transcript this and I'll put it out. And again,
Perfect.
I hold no copyright over this. If you want to take any of these ideas and use them to better society, take them. I want them out there. Feel free.
Me too. I mean, hey, if you can
promote
teach
the podcast.
people to perfect. I know I'm excited to promote the podcast, and thank you for having me. But if you want to teach anybody any intuition development, I encourage you to, because all it does is literally make you happier as a person within yourself. And
Right.
and you just do things to help other people. Like you find yourself helping all. I don't think about it. You know what I mean? I just do it. I don't.
Right. What's in it for me kind of thing, right? Like,
Oh God, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never do. Which is, it's just, I would rather it be that way.
yeah, exactly.
If there's somebody struggling and I can help them, I'm going to help them. And that's what I think everybody should have, not they'll be fine,
Right.
But
Beautiful. Well,
it does make me too sensitive to be to go out into a city where there's home. My heart breaks if I see animals, it's
yeah, it's tough.
hard. Anyway.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, Marla. I really appreciate it. I am looking forward to putting this out and getting it out there. And if anybody wants to work with you on their intuition, how can they sign up for the Intuitive Wellness Institute?
Either go to the website, intuitivewellnessinstitute.com, or just email me, marla@intuitivewellnessinstitute.com.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate this conversation. I hope that we've created a small wave of change in the world, and I look forward to talking to you again.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will talk to me again. And
All right.
you're not going to get rid of me, Joe.
Perfect.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having
Marla.
me.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening.